We have now launched the online Shockwave course. When I set the company up, which is over 12 years ago now, which is hard to believe, I was always about educating the clinicians as well, not just in terms of the technology. So when Dom Smith came to me with this idea of doing the Shockwave course, I was all for it. And Dom and Katie have done a fantastic job of putting it together. It's really impressive, really comprehensive. It is technology agnostic, so whatever system you're using will be able to help you with this. So it's a brilliant piece of work. The guys have done really well. So check it out and go to the link below and let us know what you think.
Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by Phil Learney, who's a performance coach and co-founder of Human 24. Phil, how are you doing?
I'm good, Andy. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about you and your experience because we've caught up a few times and it's a fascinating area that you're working in. So I'm looking forward to digging into that.
Cool.
Yeah. No, so the when we met, we met for the first time at David Clancy's book launch, which was that spectacular event at the Tate Modern. Um, so I'm intrigued. Like, how do you know David, and how did you get involved in that event?
You know something? You've asked me a question that I actually can't answer. I don't actually know how me and David actually came across each other. I would imagine just through the magic of our industry. Everybody seems to be interjoined and twined in some way, shape, or form. And I think we either conversed on something like LinkedIn about something that we were both doing that probably had some alignment, and then just chatted. Often how it starts. So I can't recall. I will cover this with David, and I'll say when did we actually meet and who was it through and blah blah blah. But the industry's got this fantastic thing of joining people up. And David is particularly good at it. He's very good at connecting people, and I've heard you are the same. So it was So we met through that, and then David obviously invited me along and asked if I could contribute something with respect to Human 24, and saw a lot of alignment with respect to the type of guest that would be there. And I think that was very much the case. I think I talked to like 4 people the whole day. It was one of them things. And at the end, we kind of had a bit of a debrief. And I said, look, the problem with these kind of events is the connections are almost too good in that you have good conversations, you have good connections, you have good conversations. And the problem is that takes a lot of time. So I ended up actually latching on to 2 or 3 people quite early, and we ended up chatting forever. So, and then obviously there was the event, there was a lot of presentations and stuff. So at that point, the conversations were cut dead, and it was an opportunity to listen, and it was a fantastic event.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. So I'd not met David before that event either. It's kind of bizarre, and yet I interact with him relatively regularly, and I just like all the stuff that he's doing. But I hadn't met him until then. We'd not met until then either. But then there's, like you say, there's so many great people in the room, and that's what I love about it. Is it's like actually you do get to meet people, but as you said there is so many good people in there. It's like, God, I want to speak to him. I need to go and chat to Wayne Diesel. I need to speak to Rob Madden. I need to speak to you. I need to speak to Andy Hosgood. All of this stuff, and it's like, how do we do more of that stuff? And that's actually what I'm working on projects at the moment, is how do we get more of those people? And there's so many that I speak to all the time. How do we get us together more? Because ideas come, and I know you won't have any extra time to do stuff. It's working on exciting projects. That's what really fires me up.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah. So getting into your background then, I particularly like the fact you're very prevalent in the London area, but I know that you're not from there. So where are you from originally?
I'm originally from the Lake District, so I grew up in a little village about 10 miles outside of a little town called Penrith. Uh, Again, just very normal upbringing. I actually grew up in a pub, so it was so that was interesting. And then again, I quite often relay some of the communication skills that I learned, and served me good purpose whilst I was in the industry. And that was down to the fact I think I observed my dad talking to complete strangers on a fairly regular basis. And then I moved to Leeds many years later to as part of a company I was working for actually in Penrith. and they set up a gym and a hotel facility in Leeds. I ended up helping them with the launch of that, and was in charge of kind of the spa, the medical sort of side of it, and the gym. And then went from there to work abroad for a little bit, and then ended up in London. So the company I worked abroad for, they poached me to work in London because they were meant to be setting up some really fancy sort of health and wellness facilities. They ran out of money about 2 years in, and then I ended up at Third Space, which you'll probably know of, and I'm sure many of your listeners know of. So I was at Third Space for about 4 or 5 years, and then went to Ultimate Performance as Director of Education, and was there I finished my career there for about 6 years. I was there, and yeah, it was good. I mean, I was in the midst of moving to the US. What you'll know now as Exos. I went and did a bit of work with Athletes Performance, and they were prepared to offer me a job, and it never transpired because I got offered a slightly easier and better role at Ultimate Performance, I think, for me at the time. So it was good, and that was where I finished my career, dealing largely with, again, high performers across a broad sort of spectrum of what we define as a high performer. A lot of high net worths, a handful and spattering of elite athletes. The elite athletes I largely dealt with were all rehab. So I worked quite closely with one of the well-known physios in London, and looked after a lot of his referrals. So we would work together. He would tell me, what and when, and I would look after the physical side of it. So that was good. And little projects, things like, I worked quite a bit with some movie studios, and used to work with some clients in that. And obviously throughout that, you learn a lot about human performance in, again, that broad spectrum. And you start to understand what's missing, what's prevalent, what we need more work on, what we need to focus on, and that's really where Human 24 came from, really.
Right. No, that's a great overview of all that stuff. Just to go back to a few of those things. So you mentioned about your communication skills in that pub. Like, how would you articulate what they were? What did you learn?
Well, I think it took me about 10 years to figure it out, because it was this thing, and I think being a northerner was a big bonus coming down south. Because I ended up working in London, and when I got the job at Third Space, it was just a weird thing, because I hadn't spent any time there. I just got offered the role, and then I was just, the next day I'm in there, I'm working, and then it was that whole thing of, I've got to start to find clients now, because everywhere I'd worked previously, there was sort of you were almost an instructor and a coach in general, but your personal training was a bit of a sideline. Whereas this was it was almost entirely based off me one-on-one coaching people. So it was this client acquisition piece, and I did it really quickly. I actually had a waiting list after 3 weeks of being there, and it didn't go down well with the other coaches, because obviously they'd all been ratcheting around trying to find clients for years. But what I did is I stood at reception and just watched people. They had an automated system where when people swiped, their names came up on the computer screen. And I got in and I thought, right, what's the best way of doing this? I said, well, I can go around and talk to people, but I don't know their names, and it's quite hard to break the ice and blah, blah, blah. So I went to the front desk and just watched people check in, remember the name, went on the gym floor, went and introduced myself. That was it. And within 3 weeks, I had a waiting list of clients. And it was this thing where all these people wanted a coach, but they'd never been approached by one. And it was this, and again, that was part of that learning for the industry. And obviously I ran my other business, which was the Advanced Coaching Academy, which still operates. And that was all about teaching coaches about business, nutrition and coaching, and taking that level 3 qualification and taking it further. But a large part of that was the business. And a large part of the business part was client acquisition. And it was something over the years I'd kind of mastered and figured out. And sort of 10 years in, I was like, where did I acquire this? And there was attribution of being a northerner, and we talk a lot more. And, it was this thing of, you didn't get on public transport and ignore everybody, which was kind of a done thing in London. But it was, I kind of then looked back and, you recollect, your upbringing and things like this. And I always remember my dad, throughout the summer months, because of where we were situated, most of the people that walked in during the course of a day would be complete strangers. There'd just be people walking into a pub. There'd be hikers, they'd be fishermen, they'd be whatever. So my dad just in turn went into conversation with these people about whatever. And obviously as a child, I was there watching it, and I think a lot of it just sank in. And it was this thing of shake people by the hand, make eye contact and find a topic. And that's what I did. And that was a large part of the client acquisition piece that I did. And this, again, to this day, is still the thing that if you walk into any commercial gym, you normally see a bunch of personal trainers standing around, all quite substantial egos in many respects, but they're terrified to speak to people. So, yeah.
That's a brilliant story. I mean, God, how simple is that? Like, literally, that is super simple. And it's funny, that, isn't it? Like, why do you think that people don't learn to do that? Like, I think that is basically sales. Anything like human interaction is actually really simple, and yet a lot of people don't do it.
I think it's a byproduct of the culture. Again, as a northerner, that the culture between the north and the south was very different, and still is very different. And it was this thing of, I think there's an innocence side to it where you're not shy of talking to someone on a public transport in Cumbria 20 years ago because nobody appeared to be a threat. Whereas now I think there's, because of society and how we are, I think there's people are worried about talking to strangers. And I think obviously when I first went to London, it was a big culture shock. It was like, people just don't make eye contact, don't talk to people. And obviously now what we've got is we've got a society where that a lot of the time that's actually really frowned upon. And you've got to tread very carefully about your interaction with other human beings, which again, I think then diminishes that communication aspect. But then also we've then got these gadgets. We've got, people don't talk anymore. They communicate, but they communicate through different channels. And I think nowadays, soft skills and communication skills are going to be, in the next few years, I think the gold standard of a lot of high-end, probably, high-income roles, because I think it's a skill that's dying. I think it's a skill that a lot of people don't have. I think it's something people aren't comfortable with. I think there's a lot of people suffering with, social anxiety. And I think there's a myriad of things we could get into as to what we believe or what we know some of the issues are around that. But in essence, we don't communicate well. And one of the things I try and instill in our kids is that ability to communicate and not being shy to talk to people. And and thankfully, our two teenagers are both, we can take them to any social situation where they don't know anybody, and within 20 minutes they're talking to somebody about something. And they're not shy of doing that. And I think that's a massive skill, I think, as a human being now. And obviously in our fields, if you can't communicate, it doesn't matter how many vocational skills or qualifications you've got. Ultimately, it all comes down to how you can communicate something to somebody else. And if you can't do that, I think, your job's at jeopardy.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. And sometimes it can be easy to look at it and think, why don't people just do it? But there's a lot of deep-rooted stuff that go on, and so yeah, it's not always as easy for everyone to do it. I'm intrigued for you as well. Is like, well, what were your aspirations when you were growing up? So you're in quite a rural part of the world. You're getting into this area of. Remember, I did my sports science, and it was like, right, well, you're going to be a PE teacher or you're going to work in a gym, and it's like, right, well, neither of those two are things that I particularly were thinking I'm well pumped up for doing those. So what were your aspirations when you were starting out in this area? And like, what really made you want to get into doing performance coaching or working in like the human sector?
Well, I was always into sports, and I think that was just the rural upbringing. Is that hobby wise, it was, you rode bikes, you ran around, you went to play parks, but then in the local areas there was always a football club, there was always a cricket club, there was always a rugby team or something like that, and for me there were a lot of that sort of circumnavigated around the local town. And then obviously when you went to the senior school, we moved out of the village schools, and then you go to the senior schools, and what was on offer at the senior schools was there was a lot of sport. And I was always into sport, but I was a massively overweight kid, so for me it was this thing of, I played sport. I had a lot of issues. I had knee issues. I had Osgood-Schlatters when I was younger, and I had all these problems with my knees, and I was overweight. And I think around about the age of 14, I started going to the gym, because again, it was a slightly different setup then. What I would do is I'd finish school, I'd go to the local gym, and then there was one of the local guys who lived in our village. He worked till 5:30, so I'd go to the gym between 4:30 and 5:30. Then he'd give me a lift home every night. So I got into going to the gym, which nobody of my age was doing, but there was a local gym, and it was this thing. So I started with that, and then obviously when you get to the point of you get to 16, you get to 18, and you're getting this pressure on you as to what are you going to be, what are you going to do, and blah blah blah. And I think with me it was, I wasn't ever hugely academic. I didn't particularly enjoy school for what are probably fairly obvious reasons, but I enjoyed sport. And it was this thing of, right, what am I good at? And there was two things I was good at and I enjoyed, and that was art. So I firstly I wanted to get into design. My uncle was a graphic designer. He was a product designer actually. He did a bit of graphic design on the side, but I wanted to either do graphic design or product design because I was good at it. And then I did a couple of work placements. When you hit like 16, they put you in a couple of work placements, and I hated it because I was in that era where it went from almost pen and paper onto computers, and it was the first generation Macs, the ones with the big like day glow backs on them, and I had no idea how to use a computer, so I hated it, and I was like, I don't want to do this. And then the other option was, what else am I half decent at? And it was sport. And at the time they'd only just started doing GCSE PE, so I did my GCSE PE, and then in our second year of sixth form they started doing A-level PE. So at this point, I was like, right, I want to go and do sports science. And that's what I want to do. And it was that same career path that you just talked about. It was, you could work in, in a gym, or you could be, and PTIs were a big thing at the time. It was, you could go in the military and you could be a PTI or the police. And at that point, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to be in sport. And I was actually playing a decent level of cricket. So I was playing county cricket at the time. I was captain my county, like under 19s. I was playing some minor county stuff, playing for a local club that was actually pretty strong. They played in a league called the Northern League, which was riddled with absolute superstars. We had like Jack Callis and Herschel Gibbs both proed for us. And it was this great sport, but it was this thing where I was okay, but I was never going to be, it was never going to be a career. And I had the same with rugby. And rugby, I played national division rugby, and it was the same thing with rugby. It was like, I'm okay, but I'm never going to make a living out of it. So it was this thing of, I've got to make a choice here. So I took an extra year at school, and there was about 11 of us did it, which was quite funny because we were all allowed to continue to play rugby, and we were all rugby players. So in upper sixth, when we were all meant to have left school, we all continued playing. So we absolutely smashed everybody. And we all took an extra year at school because it meant that I didn't need to go and do an HND to get onto a degree course. So it was easier just for me to take an extra year at school and go somewhere else for a year to then join a degree course. And then did sport and exercise science. And that was kind of that path. And then obviously throughout my degree, I was never sure of what I was going to do. And then obviously went into personal training. Well, I went into fitness instruction first because I went back up north, and there was no personal training up north where we were. There was nobody doing personal training. So I was actually the first personal trainer in our area, and I had to really push for them to allow me to do that. And then I helped them launch it across the whole group. It was a hotel gym, but it had quite a big membership base. And I helped them launch that across the whole group. And then it went from there, really.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think we're similar eras in that, where again there was no gyms in. Right, there was a YMCA. I'm from Southport. There's a YMCA, and then they opened another one, and it was just becoming a thing. So, were you thinking then when you did you became a PT, you done your sports science? Like, what was your route then into that world?
I wanted to be a celebrity personal trainer because at the time there was a couple of celebrity personal trainers actually on TV. They like do the morning TV and blah blah blah. And I thought that sounds good. I'm gonna be a celebrity personal trainer. And it was this thing of, I didn't know what it entailed. I didn't know what it was. It was like, look, I'm gonna train famous people. And this was very early. And then obviously I got into it, and it was I wasn't training necessarily, I wasn't training any famous people to start with. But what I ended up doing is all the people that I trained locally were all quite high net worths because of the nature of personal training. I mean, this is, well, let's be now 30, yeah, just shy of 30 years ago. And I was charging £30 an hour 30 years ago, so it was what it was. And that was, I just set it at that because I think at the time they were charging that in London or whatever it was. And I set it at that and ended up getting busy. And by default, because of what I charged, most of the people I dealt with were all the big earners. There was one guy, I remember he owned a massive company, had a helicopter and all sorts of stuff, but that was in the local area of Penrith. And I think by default, because of the way that my sort of career went, I always ended up dealing with these high performers, these people who performed in some way, shape, or form. And then years later, I ended up with some celebrities and blah, blah, blah. And ironically, there was a chap I started training in third space years later. And this is a great story, Andy. And I recognized his name. He had a bizarre name. And I started training him. I thought, I know you from somewhere. And I couldn't work it out. And I couldn't figure it for a long time. And about a year down the line, I Googled him. The celebrity trainer I used to watch on TV was this guy I was now training. So the guy that I'd watched on TV all those years ago, who put me into this process of being a celebrity trainer, I was actually now training. A chap called Steele Williams, who used to do the morning TV. And bizarrely, a couple of years later, the guy who used to do the nutrition stuff on morning TV actually started working with as well. So it was this kind of full circle thing, and then I dealt with a few actors, actresses, they were always fun because it was shorter project work. It was kind of like we have to go from there to there in a very kind of quick time. So that was quite cool. And then athletes rehab, that was always very fulfilling. And then just my everyday clients, and again, because of the nature of where I was and what I charged, most of those clients were CEOs. They were all C-suite. And then towards the latter end, I had a couple of clients who used to come in with security. I had one guy who had armed security with him all the time, and yeah, it was fascinating.
So were you driven by the fact that you wanted to be associated or working with these celebrities, high net worth people, or was it the fact you wanted more money, or what was like the driver for you?
I loved what I did, and still to this day do. I loved what I did because training to me changed my life. Training created everything that I had. It was, that small shred of confidence I had when I was a kid grew exponentially because I trained, I exercised, I found something I was good at that made me feel better, that made me function better, that made me think better, that made me more driven, and to me that was a hell of a thing to then transfer to other people. So it was always that thing of I can help people here, and I know it's that thing that everybody says, but I got in the industry to help people because it did for me something that I then wanted to share with the world. I was like, I want everybody else to have this same experience that I had in whatever way, shape, or form it is. So, if I had somebody who came in, and I remember I dealt with a chap who when he came to me, he couldn't walk upstairs. He'd had a double knee operation, double hip replacement, and couldn't walk upstairs. And to get him to that point that he could do that and then beyond was huge. It was a massive thing. And it was that thing of constantly wanting to help people, and the other bits, the celebrity bits and things like this along the way, it just ended up, they're just another client. They're just another person with a slightly diverse set of goals. And it was fun at times because, I trained someone for Star Wars, for example, and I grew up watching Star Wars, so it was quite cool. And there's certain perks to these things. You train someone who was a sports superstar and they get you tickets to something or whatever it might be. And there was all these little sort of token benefits. I traveled with a couple of my clients quite extensively, but they weren't celebrities as such. They weren't TV or movie stars or whatever, but in their own right, they were people at the top of the game. And, I used to go to Dubai 3 or 4 times a year. I'd go to Mallorca was a continuous one for us. Went to Miami every Christmas for about 5 years with a client. And it was, and that was nice. And it was this thing where, you really felt like you were driving things. But for me, it was always, how am I going to get the quality of life that I was striving for? And I think early in your career, there's those token things that you want to get, the material things. And then you get to them and then you're like, well, it isn't really about that. And then you figure yourself out and really what do you want? And then wife, kids later, and your goals are you're still striving for a quality of life. And I always use that term because quality of life is so widespread. It's not, I want health. I want, people talk about balance, but I want all of those things that potentially I can then hand over to other people. And that has always been the key driver. And I think when Human 24 came about, that goal was the same. It was, look, what are the big markers that I can change in someone's life that can make significant changes? And if I can do that, I know that whatever I'm doing, I will always love. I'll also get those nice little nods and those things at the end of it. It's like somebody doing, rehab with somebody, and that person gets to the end of it, and you haven't just got them out of pain. You've got them, the quality of life has just changed significantly because they're able to move where they couldn't before, and there's no pain anymore. And that's significant, right? These are things that, what more motivation do you need? You know what I mean? You get these people who achieve these things, and you're a large part of that. And I just want to play my part in somebody else's story, in essence.
Yeah. No, I think it's great, and you can see that it's genuine, that it's had a profound impact on you in terms of what you've done. But also, I think it's really good that you acknowledge that, yeah, you want nice things. I still want nice things now, even though I'm, you're more established in your thing. I'm looking at a new car at the moment. I'm well excited about it, and it's like I think certainly in this country it can be frowned upon to think, oh, I want to make money, and it's a big driver for me. Is like, no, look, it's fine to want to make a profit. It's fine to charge for your services and really drive things forward. And you should never, ever be apologetic about that or feel embarrassed, because you're entitled to. Like I know how hard you work with all the stuff that you've done and all the experience that's gone into your projects and all these things. And I'm really passionate about helping other business owners to think, actually, no, let's look at how we can do everything. You've got to charge a good amount because you're offering a great service. So how do you perceive the industry around that topic of people? Like, one of our values is embrace profitability, because I want it ingrained in our company that, look, it's good to make money, and everyone else who we work with, you should be happy to do that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always this perception. It's the way that you look at things, right? Is that money is a facilitator. It's a facilitator. It's not, and if you look at it just like that, it's the same as health. Health is a facilitator. Sleep is a facilitator, and there's all these things we do in life that just facilitate the next thing that we do in life. And ultimately, because, money is a currency, it facilitates a lot of things. It makes life easier, but it also makes life harder. I've worked a lot with high net worths, people who've got that. From an external perspective, people would look at them and go, they shouldn't have a care in the world because they've got loads of money. But it's one of the most stressful things that you will see someone go through. And unless you've been privy to it, it doesn't make sense, because everybody else just looks at it. It's like when you look at professional sport. People look at professional sports, men and women who are clearly earning a lot of money on a weekly, monthly basis. But they're in a career where the career is literally on a fine piece of string, because if they get injured, that's their career, that's everything they've ever known gone. And this is this thing, is people look at them and then you hear about footballers who they retire and they start to get identity crisis, and they start to get depression, anxiety, because they've lost their identity. They don't know where they are, and people are like, what have they got to mourn about? They've got loads of money. So I always think, look, money is a facilitator. And that's why I use the term quality of life a lot. But it's how your interpretation of that quality of life changes throughout your life. Once upon a time, I was like, look, I was chasing two significant material things that, fortunately for me, I ended up buying and I acquired and I had for a long period of time. There's two things that, as I was a kid, I used to have a poster of a car on my wall. And that was the thing that years later I was able to buy. This car that was on my wall, and I bought it. I didn't tell anyone I bought it, didn't go on social media and take pictures of it and show everybody I had it and blah, blah, blah. And actually the first picture I put on social media was the day I sold it. And it was like, I ticked that box, but then I'm like, what's the next box? And then the next box becomes something else. And you were saying about, earning money for yourself and blah, blah, blah. I don't earn money for myself. I earn money for my family now. I earn money and I facilitate a life that I think my kids and family deserve. And this is why, that drive towards revenue, profitability, all of those things, always massively motivate me, because they're the wins. They're the things like when I played sport, it's the W. It's a W on the board. You don't just play sport, I don't think. You play sport because you're competitive. And if you lose all the time and you never get anywhere, if you lose and learn something and then in turn from that you then win something, that's business. Business is about failure. It's about failure. It's about learning from those things. And I think that's just life in general. It's like relationships. It's like being a parent. It's like you make mistakes, you learn from them, you move on. And there's lows, there's highs, and there's all these different things. And again, if we go back at money, Andy, I just think it's a thing. It's a thing. It's a facilitator. People think those with it are very lucky. People without it think they're very unlucky. And I'm like, well, there's factors, but factors are things that can be manipulated, and they're malleable, and there are things that you can always do. And we have different upbringings, we have different opportunities, we have different chances. But like I was saying right at the very start of the conversation, a lot of opportunities are about greeting people, saying hello to people, meeting people, networking with people. And if you're going to sit in your bedroom most of your days and never speak to another human being, you're probably never going to find someone to have a relationship with. You're probably never going to network with a bunch of people who are going to give you opportunity. All of everything that I've ever achieved in business has always had something to do with another human being. I can always link it back to another human being. We are having this conversation because another human being linked us up, or we connected. And I think we'd have connected irrespective of those other ones. I think eventually we would have crossed paths. We'd have said hello. And off the back of that there's a high likelihood, and we can have this conversation in 5 years, Andy, that somewhere on the line, I will do something for you which will make you money, and you will do something for me that will make me money. Now, if we'd never connected, that would have never happened. So I think connection is massive. Communication is massive. And I think there's so many people that they keep their cards so close to the chest because they're terrified about this thing of, I can't be seen to be chasing this monetary thing. And I don't care whether it's, if it's a thing. If you want to buy something, a car, a watch, whatever the hell it might be, years down the line, you look back at it and you go, that isn't as valuable to me as it was then as it is now. And I think people but you've got to go through that process. You've got to have that time where you buy nice things, then you buy practical things, then you buy nice things for somebody else, and then you care less about yourself and you care more about, and that's just life. When you get married, you have kids, whatever it might be. I think those markers change, right? And it's the same with business. I think the way that we perceive business is very, very different, right?
It definitely is. And it's, I think, as well as that, from my side, a driver is that we need profit to invest more back in, to build a team, to do more events, to allow us time to spend time doing these things. It's like this. I'm a really big believer in that. And that's really the driver for me, is like, yes, I've got big plans for what we need to do. And the reality is you do tend to need resources to facilitate that. So no, I'm fully on board with all of it. So yeah, what was the car out of interest?
It was Ferrari F430.
Nice.
And it was, and it was just, I had a poster of one on my wall when I was growing up. And it was, obviously, it remained my dream car, despite the fact there was other cars that came out in amongst it. But it was the poster I had on my wall. I had that and a Lamborghini Countach. And I never really, I don't know what it was that put me off that, but it was, and I think it was a fortunate thing that I liked the other one because it was a lot cheaper. But it was, but yeah, it was just a thing. And I got the thing, I enjoyed it. And then I was like, right, I'm over it,
Yeah.
And I still to this day love cars. We fortunate we have a very nice car on the driveway, but it's I now need to get 3 kids in it. And you start to get fairly limited as to what that vehicle can become, right? So it's there's all these things, and again look at your business. How many people do you employ?
7 of us.
Right. So 7 people, if you didn't make money, you wouldn't employ 7 people. You wouldn't change 7 people's lives.
Yeah.
Indirectly, right? They might not have a job. And this is the way that people, that people see business owners and entrepreneurs and people who employ other people as, they're in it for, because they're at the top of that tree, there's that resentment towards them. And I'm like, well, hold on, but you give 7 people a job. You pay 7 people and you pay the government to have 7 people. and there's these whole, it's actually cheaper not to employ anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it is. Yeah, there's loads of stress that comes with it, and I think there is a perception of, I'll talk, relate to me. It's like, I'll go do a selfie with you or go to David Clancy's thing, and he's like, God, yeah, that's well easy life. And it's like, well, yeah, that bit is great, but there's, in my instance, 18 years of previous stuff. You've been doing it 30 years in this area. So yeah, I love it, but there's significantly more stress in having a company than not. However, it also empowers you, and it's like you say, it's great. The teams that I work with, I love it, and it's like, right, well, how do I pay them more money? How do I recruit more like-minded people, do more projects? So I think and that's what I think is one of the most exciting things about business, is it gives you opportunities to work on exciting projects. So like, we've connected. I love your mindset. It's like, right, well, what could we do? And it's exciting, isn't it? It gives you these opportunities to say, right, well, how could we add what you're doing with what we're doing and do something?
Yeah. And who do I know that could help Andy out? Who do I know that could help Andy out? Or who do I know that Andy could probably help? And that's the way I'm now wired. I'm like, I'm about connections. I'm about networks. I'm like, look, this week alone, I've probably made, I reckon this week, what are we on? We're like Tuesday, aren't we? I reckon I've probably made 10 intros this week already of somebody to somebody else. And in turn, there's also, I'm getting emails from people that I've been connected to by somebody else that are exciting as hell. I got a message yesterday because I connected with somebody who then I asked if they could connect with somebody else and actually give them some of our products. And they gave them the products probably 6 months ago. And I'll share this with you once we're off the call. I can't say too much about it on the call, but I'll share this with you after we have the debrief. But I got a message from them yesterday, and they'd said they'd apologized for not using the product, and they said, this is amazing. And we got this really nice message, and I'm literally sharing it with everybody within my internal sort of network and going, hey guys, look at this. We got this yesterday. And then today I've had the same on another conversation that we were having that's super exciting. And that's the thing, is that days are hard, and there's a bunch of stuff that's, there's constantly something sweeping the legs from underneath you, but there's always something picking you back up. And I'll tell you what, Andy, every single time it points back to a person. It's always somebody I've been connected to, somebody I've, and somebody messaged me yesterday, and he said, off the back of that same conversation, he goes, don't forget about me. And I said, I don't. I said, I never forget about somebody that helped us along the way. I said, because that to me is it's the thanks that sometimes you don't get, right? The amount of people that I've helped up along the way, and they casually forget about you when it comes to them, doing something. And I don't do anything to expect anything back. But I think that's the courtesy of our industry, is that, everybody's out to help each other. And that's why I love it as well, is that there's so many people who are just the same mindset. Everybody's like, look, let me help you out. Let me, introduce you to this person, this person, this person. And yeah, I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And just on that subject then, so how did the athletes' performance or Exos, how did that opportunity come about?
I just went and did one of their internships. So at the time,
Which one was that at? Which one did you go to?
I went to the one in Pensacola in Florida. So it was, I connected with Nick Winkelman. You might know Nick. Nick and Brett Bartholomew. So Brett wrote a great book called Conscious Coaching. He's done a lot since Athletes Performance. He was like the head of nutrition at the time, I think. And what happened is I went out there for this intern, and it ended up we did a whole day on nutritional stuff, and it ended up basically I ran it with Brett, and it was just me and him throwing ideas back and forward at each other whilst everybody else listened. And off the back of it, I sort of said, I thought, I'm going to be bold here. So I went up and I said, look, is there any chance that, there'd be a position here for me? And they said, yeah. And the problem was I can't remember what age I'd have been, but I've been in the industry a while. And they said, the problem is, he goes, we run a process. You have to start at the bottom. He says, you might move really quickly, but you have to start at the bottom. And they'd explained to me, they said, well, first thing you've got to do is you'll be the person. And at the time there was an NFL team in the facility. And there was one of the lads was running around, like giving them like their pre-intro and post-workout drinks and blah, blah, blah. He goes, you got to do that first. And I was like, And at the time I was dealing with high net worths in London and earning quite a decent amount of money. And then I was like, well, I've kind of topped out where I was, because the place that I was working at the time wouldn't let me increase my prices. This was the place I had a waiting list at for a long, long time, but they wouldn't let me increase my prices. So ultimately I was working at a capacity that I could never go past. I had no other way of making money. So I thought, right, I'm going to go to US and I'm going to go after my original passion, which was to work in sports, which was, I did sport and exercise science, came out the back of that. I was like, right, how do I work with celebrities, but also ensue my passion? So I was like elite athletes. So I thought I'll get a position there and then hopefully get some opportunities in NFL or college or NBA or NHL or whatever it might be, and be able to do that, which at the time there was nothing going on in the UK. I think there was 2 football clubs, I think at the time, had S&C coaches, Everton, and I think Man United had one. And there just wasn't anything going on, from a pro sport perspective in the UK. And you were typically recruited in those sports because you'd been there or you knew somebody. So there wasn't really a route in before the UKSCA anyways. And then Nick offered me a job with UP. We were actually featured there was a Time Out piece on the best trainers in London. And there was myself and Nick Mitchell, who at the time owned Ultimate Performance. And we were featured in it. So he said, do you want to meet up? And he said, we're opening a facility in Mayfair. Would you like to come? I said, can I charge what I want? He goes, yeah, you can charge whatever you want. I goes, are they my clients? He goes, yeah, you'd be self-employed. So I was the only self-employed trainer that they had. And then the other thing was to come on as their director of education. So we ran Ultimate Performance Education for about 2 years. And then that we kind of wrapped that up because Nick was too busy opening gyms and I was too busy doing my own educational stuff. So we called it a day on that and we closed that part of the business and we just cracked on with our own bits.
So the education bit then, what were you, who and what were you educating?
So I developed the Advanced Coaching Academy, which is my other business, which still operates. And I just saw a massive void, at the time. So when I became a trainer, there was only probably 2 people that you could learn from. That, the internet wasn't what it was. There was no online lessons or what have you. And there was very few people educating in the health and wellness space. So really the only 2 people that were rabid and were doing stuff were Charles Poliquin, which you'll probably remember, and a chap called Paul Check, which again I'm sure you probably know of, and that was it. And outside of that, you either had to pick up magazines. So there was things like Ultra Fit, if you managed to grab it, something like Muscular Development, which was a big bodybuilding magazine, but they used to have a lot of science-based articles in there back in the day. So it was, you had very little in the way of learning avenues. So I started doing some seminars that ended up being really busy. And then I thought, right, I need to do a vocational qualification of this because the level 3 is terrible. The level 3 is about that big. And people learn it. And it was going from being a 6-month course to now a 6-week course to now you can do it over a couple of weekends. And it was just getting worse and worse. And I knew full well that the industry standard was just getting lower and lower and lower. So if you want to become a personal trainer, you can do it in a couple of weekends. So people are coming into the industry with no experience in business, very little in the way of nutritional knowledge and very little in the way of coaching knowledge. So I thought, right, if I write what would be the level 4, 5, 6, 7, I can sell it as a course and get people on it. And unfortunately, that's what I did. I wrote the equivalent of, I think it was 5 doctorates. It was, again, will this just be audio or will this be video as well?
It'll be video as well, yeah. Show us the video.
Well, just to give you an idea, so that's one of the courses.
Oh, wow.
So I've got 3 of those. So that's
So what is in that then? Open up some stuff. What's
well, that's nutrition. So you've got an introduction to applied nutrition, dietary compliance, behavioral psychology, nutritional programming, advanced nutritional theory, special populations. So that's a nutrition course. So I wrote that over the course of about 3 years. So I wrote all 3 courses. It took me about 3 years to write them. And in amongst that, I did a lot of seminars, which I still do. I mean, we do seminars with 100 to 200 people in them on a regular basis about topics like fat loss, strength training, hypertrophy, and business. We did a lot of stuff on business. I mean, the business course is the same size as that. And the business course is all about how do you set up a personal training business. And it's very different to kind of what's on offer now in the business space with personal training. Personal training, a lot of stuff's gone online. I don't do a lot of online stuff. It's all about online training, scaling those models. So a lot of it's about social media advertising and blah, blah, blah. But again, one of the big flaws in that is that the people don't look at service or vocational qualifications. So what you've got now is you've got so many people doing online training, but very few people actually very well qualified. So they're level 3 coaches that know how to write a very basic program, and that's what people are paying for. So it's those that are a bit more experienced. And now what we've got, we seem to have personal training for the general public is going down in standard. But what's happening is all the good coaches are now moving towards elite sport because there's now opportunities. So a lot of the guys that I converse with and do work with now, the vast majority of them have been in some kind of elite sport. They've been in the F1, they've been in the Premier League, they do rugby stuff, they've done all the S&C qualifications. A lot of them have done the degrees, which again didn't exist when I did my degree. They do the S&C degrees. Some of them got masters in it. So it's very different now. I think there's a level of academia at this end, and then the other end where general public are being trained by people just as qualified as they were 30 years ago. And the service level isn't as good. But then there is also that elite level of service, which we do quite a bit of work on around, dealing with high net worths, because the service they demand is very different. Personal training 20 years ago was, your job was to train somebody, not injure them, and facilitate them progressing in whatever way, shape, or form. Then it became personal training and nutrition. And now what's expected of a coach, and I've always used the term coach rather than personal trainer, because what encompasses a coach is somebody who's looking at all facets of wellness. So if you're a coach now, you need to know about all the current trends. You need to understand about, things like hyperbaric chambers. You need to understand about cold water immersion. You need to understand about all those modalities, but you also need to have a network of people who look at things like rehab. So every personal trainer should have a sidekick, almost like a Batman and Robin, who's a physio. You need a soft tissue specialist. You need a physio. You need somebody who's able to do medical checks. You need someone and it's converging those networks and bringing them together. And I'm actually speaking tonight at one of the big London facilities later on today. And that's a facility that's been built around all these modalities being under one roof. And they brought all these practitioners under one roof. So therefore a trainer can advance their services. And the talk I'm actually doing tonight is all about that. Because what's happening is these trainers are starting at these facilities, but they're not entirely sure what to do with it all. It's like you've got all these tools and these people around you, but you're not entirely sure how to bring it and merge it all together. So again, I'm going in to try and help them merge that together, because that was a service I was offering 15 years ago. If my clients traveled, I looked after their jet lag. I did phase shifting and I did phase delays and phase advances with my clients when they traveled, which was unheard of. People didn't even know what the science was back then. And if I had clients who were eating out, I'd navigate where they were eating out at if they wanted me to. If they were staying at hotels, I would phone ahead, find out if the hotel had things like blackout blinds. So there was all this stuff that I was doing 15, 20 years ago, which just fully aligns with what everybody's doing now. So we're doing a lot of work with Human 24 in the sleep tourism space. Are you familiar with sleep tourism? Which is now, now I was talking about this last night again on another podcast, but sleep tourism is because there's, the average person who used to go on holiday in this country, and you look at Westerners in general, what do you do when you go on holiday? You disrupt your sleep patterns because you start waking up later and going to bed later. You disrupt your sleep patterns. You drink alcohol, which we know ruins sleep. You go away to rest. which you don't really do. You just stop work. So you stop work to go and disrupt your sleep pattern. You drink loads of alcohol. You drink loads of, eat loads of really bad food. And then you come back expecting that you need another holiday. And sleep tourism is now the tangent of that, in that you've got these really high performers who go, well, I can't afford to take a week away every year, go away, get drunk, stay out late, sleep in every day, because I come back an absolute mess. So now what you're getting with a lot of these high-end facilities, and we do some work with the Mandarin Oriental, and part of their thing is if you stay at their hotel, you will have the best night's sleep you've ever had, because they have temperature regulated rooms that you can adjust. So you can turn the temperature the same temperature you have at home. They have a pillow menu. You can pick from 10 different pillows. I always say to people, travel with your pillowcase. It's a really small thing. You package up. It smells like home, feels like home. We've got they have blackout blinds. They have biocentric lighting. I've got a bulb sat here. These are just to be fitted actually in my office. So they're biocentric bulbs. So that emits the same wavelengths of light as sunlight. So it means that when I wake up in the morning and turn my lights on, as far as my body's concerned, it's bright light. For travel, I have these. You've probably seen these. So that emits blue light into my optic nerve. So it means I can regulate my circadian biology. So there's all of these things that I used to do, which are now very prevalent and we know more about, and this is the space that Human 24 essentially resides in. And the reason that came about, Andy, was because I spent probably the latter 10 years of my career dealing with people who had really bad nervous system management, i.e. they were stressed to hell and they took too many stimulants. They were utilizing depressants to sleep, either sedatives or alcohol. So they had disrupted sleep patterns. So they had poor sleep. They had really bad nervous system management. They were hyper stressed. They didn't manage travel very well. And essentially that all pointed back to the circadian biology. So for me, it was, look, if we can regulate these things in pro athletes, business owners, blah, 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 the significance we have over mental health, metabolic health, cardiovascular health, and cellular health is massive. So it was like this thing of, hold on, instead of just looking at little smidgens and margins of progression or error or whatever it might be, I know that 71% of the UK don't get enough sleep duration, never mind quality, sleep duration. So if we can move that metric, the impact we have on society as a general rule is massive. Organizations, be them sports or business or whatever it might be. If you imagine a workforce of 5,000 people and I improve each person's sleep by a margin, the impact across the board is massive, because that's accumulated, right? So you've got all these people coming into work who all feel a bit happier because they're not shattered. They've all got better relationships at home because they're not tired all the time. They're not spending their entire day caffeinating the hell out of themselves because they don't need to. The impact's significant, right? And this is why I wanted to look at those fields that I'd spent many years learning about and understanding and addressing, really. So, those become significant, right?
No, it's really interesting. So like what was the mission, and then how do you come to make it a business? Like what is that process for you to commit to it? It's a big project, isn't it? That all of that stuff.
It's just problem solving, Andy. It's like everything you guys do. It's look, there's a very significant problem that's measurable, that we can see, that we've all experienced. Again, on the call yesterday, I was talking to, I think there was a couple of hundred people on this call. And I said, look, there's some of these things I don't need to tell you. We don't need science to tell us. I said, look, if you have a bad night's sleep, the next day you're irritable. There isn't but I'm not. Every single person on the call really, in reality, goes, yeah, he's right. And it's all these things where we can just go, we know what causes this. There's other factors in the mix, but ultimately, anybody who's sleep deprived is going to make bad cognitive decisions. They're going to be, so it's just problem solving, Andy. I spent 10 years looking at people's problems, and I was like, what are the biggest problems here? And if I can identify the biggest problems, I can identify the things that we can have the biggest impact on. And anything in life, I think, is a business. If you have a business that can make a big impact, you can turn that business into a big business. So for me, this is the, again, if we want to go financial, this is the golden egg for me. I can do something I love. I can do something I'm hugely passionate about. I can do something that helps millions of people. And at the same time, I can extend the quality of life that I have, my kids have. I can probably change the quality of life my next generation of my family have. And I can do that whilst doing something I love and that helps human beings. I'm like, easy, right? It's problem solving, Andy. That's all it is. Identify a problem, create a solution to that problem, and scale it. Tell everybody about it. Tell the world about it.
Yeah. No, I think it's really good. I'm a big fan of thinking big and having that goal, but thinking big with it, because it's like someone's got to do it. Like, if you're going to think, why not think big? So, like, what do you see the vision of Human 24 being?
Oh, again, global impact. You know, this is, and again, I think years ago I would have never ever said something like that, because there's always that fear. You sit in the background. There's always that fear that, you know, I'm going to say this and it's eternally recorded, and this podcast is going to be available to future generations. But it's one of them things where you kind of want to go watch this space. I have no doubt whatsoever as to where we're going. You know, every day there is something that happens that just confirms, you know, what I see and what I perceive. It's never as fast as you want it to be, but it couldn't be, because when we started, consumer adoption was nowhere near there. Even probably global adoption wasn't there. But the difference in the last 4 years between us proposing what we were doing and not a lot of people getting it, to now, everybody gets it. Everybody understands what we're doing. We might have to explain little details, but everybody gets it. And the thing for us, it was about, we went after the verticals that understood us. So, you know, sleep tourism at the start of this year, if you went onto Google, and feel free, jump on Google after this call and just type in sleep tourism. You have a look at the amount of articles that have been published in the last 3 months on sleep tourism. And you tell me that's not a big space. It's enormous. Then type in something like circadian and have a little look and see how many articles have been published in the last 6 months versus the last 3 years. Every single thing that we do and we talk about has now just gone like this. And I knew this. I was witness to it. And you know, we've, as a business, had to go, we've just got to kind of bide our time here. We've got to sit back a little. We've got to appreciate the growth, but understand that isn't going to turn into commercial growth just yet. We've got to appreciate the growth. We've got to, you know, in the last month, Andy, we've acquired an extra 2,500 people have joined our newsletter in the last month. 2,500 people. We have a waiting list of nearly 700 people waiting for our products to come back into stock. We've sold out of everything we do. You know, we couldn't keep up with demand. And we haven't driven anything. Our organic numbers with respect to what we've done in sales organically are off the charts. You know, but again, when we go to an investor, they just look at the numbers and assume we've been spending loads of money on marketing and sales and blah blah blah. But we haven't, you know, and this is where it's exciting. But again, I've got to put some context, because when we send a financial deck out to somebody, you know, the reading on it isn't what they would standardly look for, because we've started on a curve that was very, very slow and then got very, very steep. And obviously when that curve's early, you have to bide your time. You have to wait until that curve matures and the audience is ready. You know what I mean? It's like a fine wine. You've got to give it its time. And this is what we've done. And I think we've done it incredibly strategically well. And I mean, we're waiting for we've sold out everything apart from one SKU. So we're waiting for a full restock at the end of, well, it's about mid-March, we get everything in. And then when we do that, we've literally got triggers that we are just going to pull everywhere. And we've even got a couple of big announcements that we're holding off on. We're not making public until then. We'll have a load of press releases and things, because again, we don't want to garner too much attention and don't want to. And it always sounds a bit bizarre to say it, but the problem is we haven't got anything to sell anybody. So until we've got that stock in, you know, I don't want to be pointing people towards the website, because they're going to get there and just be disappointed. You know, so yeah, it's exciting. And confidently will stand by my word, and it is one of those watch this space, Andy scenarios. And when I have conversations with people about it, I think they get it. I think they understand that.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. It's great to hear it's going so well. So, like from this, you've got a good social media presence, but like from that marketing perspective, like how do you do it for this product? Because yours is quite B2C, isn't it, in terms of how you sell things? So, like, how hard is it to come up with a strategy, or what goes into it to do it? Because it's a different market to our, we're mainly B2B.
Yeah, I mean, it's we stepped away from kind of B2C because it was, again, market adoption, market maturity. People didn't get it, they didn't understand it. So what you'd end up doing is it's a bit like going to a conference, Andy, and talking to someone about what you do. You've either got the person that doesn't have a clue what you're doing and the person that does. That's a 10-minute conversation versus an hour conversation. Now, if we look at marketing, I've got to bend this person's arm. Now, I don't want to bend this person's arm. I've got to go at the early adopters. I've got to go at the people that currently get it and understand what we do. So if I look at, for example, the audience that Whoop have, the people that have adopted wearable tech are our audience. Anybody on the planet that's bought one of these is our audience. Anybody that's put in biocentric lighting, they're our audience. So what I've got to do, I've got to identify who the audience is and where they reside. It's no different to any other business. It's demographics, right? So we do a demographic, we do psychographics, we do all those things, and we just find out where is our consumer sitting, where are they, and what are they lacking. I already know what they're lacking. So it's just a matter of, for us, it's that basic almost marketing funnel in many respects, is that we've got to firstly tell people we exist. We've got to then tell them what we do, and then what we've got to do is we've got to present the solutions we have to their problems. So it goes back to really fundamental basics. But alongside that, we've also got a huge amount of levers that we're going to pull that will draw the middle ground of people who aren't the adopters or who are just needing convinced. We've got all the convincing levers ready to go. We've got one which is, there probably isn't a bigger it's a bit like a celebrity endorsement. If you think celebrity endorsement, you need somebody who's got credibility, right? So we've got some of the most credible organizations on this planet that have just got involved with what we're doing. And again, I'll share after we get off this call the message I got yesterday. But because of that, we are going to pull this lever that explains to the average consumer out there, whether they understand it or whether they don't, that what we are doing and what we're selling is immensely credible. We're changing our website right now. We're this overarching thing of transparency. So the supplement industry is a mess. People are buying horrendously dosed, horrendously sourced ingredients everywhere, but nobody's really telling them. So we've got this real transparent narrative about what we do and how we source our ingredients, where they come from, what the dosages are, and we're talking about all of those. We do an electrolyte, and our electrolyte's a hypotonic electrolyte. Now, there's a difference between a hypotonic and an isotonic electrolyte. Consumer doesn't know this. And what's happening now is there's a bunch of people selling formulas very similar to ours to runners. And it's not designed for a runner. It would actually cause a runner problems if they kept consuming it. But there's brands selling pretty much the same formula as ours to runners and endurance athletes, which is detrimental to their performance because they need to utilize an isotonic electrolyte at those particular times. So we designed it for a specific purpose and we outline what that purpose is. And there's things like that exist everywhere, where people are, they're buying ingredients, but legally you only have to tell them what the ingredient is. You don't have to tell them how it was extracted. You don't have to tell them what form. You don't have to tell them how many active ingredients are in it. And the thing is, when you start to look at things like botanicals, is all of those things are massively significant. If you've got no active ingredients inside of it, it doesn't work. It's a bit like the difference between buying extra virgin olive oil versus cheap olive oil. One's full of nutrients, the other one isn't. Still olive oil. Easiest way to explain it.
Yeah.
I wrote a piece the other day on oregano. 85% of the oregano on the market isn't oregano leaf, which is what it's meant to be. It's either it's tainted with other compounds, normally things like myrtle and olive leaf. But when you buy oregano leaf, you're actually buying a mixture of plants, and you're also buying oregano root and oregano stem as well. And now, if that was a supplement which had an effect dosage, you're not going to get that effect unless you take 3 to 4 times the dosage that you're meant to. Now that becomes significant. So all of these things that brands aren't talking about, we will openly talk about because we've got nothing to hide. And that is it's quite a novel position to be in, Andy. It's like really messed up, is that we've got a product that works. So part of our criteria is, and one of the big sort of contracts that we got is because I just sent them product. They told me they get 600 pitches a year for supplement brands wanting to be involved with them, and none of them get over the line. And I sent them product. I said, test it, and you tell me whether it works. So they tested it, and the test period was meant to be about 7 or 8 weeks. They contacted us after week 4 to get a formal contract in place. You know, and this is just down to, and the thing is, I look at it for somebody who wasn't in the supplement industry for many, you know, I was in and around it all the time, Andy, but for somebody to go, well, that was really simple. it was design and make a product that works. It's quite simple, and then tell them what it's going to do, and when it does it, they go, great, I'll invest in that. It's like tech, right? You buy a piece of tech and you go, what does that tech do? Oh yeah, it does that. Brilliant. Worth the investment. Like buying a car with no wheels, right? Oh,
yeah.
It told me it got me from A to B, but it doesn't. So I want my money back. And this is the thing, it's just a really bizarre industry. And we have all this stuff around that people are taking and doing and blah, blah, blah. But they're not being lied to, because to be honest, a lot of the manufacturers don't actually know what they're doing either. They just think, oh, ashwagandha, that's in right now. Everybody's using it. So let's get some ashwagandha powder and stick it in this. But ashwagandha powder is powdered plant. Very different between a powdered plant and getting it from the specific part of the plant that you need it that has the active ingredients in it. Very different. And it's extracted using the right method that doesn't damage those active compounds. Very different.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating space, but again, the consumer isn't privy to any of this, and we want to make them privy to it. And that's just an air of transparency that no other brands have.
No, it's great, and it's great to hear that it's being recognised as well, because it's like it's all well and good knowing some of this stuff, but you want people to start doing it. So the demand sounds to be really good. And then one last question. I know you've got to head off for your next meeting, but when we were at the event with David, there was a talk on fear, which I thought was great. And like, what role has fear played in your career and existence? And then you mentioned about the vision you've got for Human 24 and so on, and sometimes you wouldn't have said it out loud. So what role has that played, and what role does it continue to play for you?
Constant. If it doesn't scare you, it's probably not worth doing. You know, that's my view. I'm like, look, I live on the seat of my pants every single day. You know, from every possible perspective. Time, you know, we talked about that just before we got on the call, actually. You know, time, your management of time, I'm like, it's endless. You know, I'm like, you know, I'll get to this point and then I'll ease off a little bit, and you don't. I get to that point, I put my foot down a bit harder. And this has been life, but I enjoy it. It's this, I get this sick, I guess, somewhat perverted kind of thing of being busy as hell all the time and running from pillar to post. And you know, I've got a meeting at 3:30 in London. After that meeting, I've got to go on hot desk for 30 minutes because I've got a bunch of stuff I've got to get finished. Then I'm straight into a 2.5-hour presentation, like a Q&A with a bunch of aspiring coaches. Then I've got to get home. I've then got a deadline with respect to I've got to get to bed by a certain time because, again, I value my sleep. And then I'm up tomorrow morning, and tomorrow's pretty crazy. But I love it. And yeah, I'm scared all the time. You know, I'm scared to make the right and wrong decision. I'm scared. You know, I have financial fear. I'm like, what if tomorrow everything goes pear-shaped? And, you know, what if I can't, you know, maintain the quality of life that my kids and my family have got used to? You know, so it's constant, Andy. I think, you know, I think it's just part and parcel of it. It's like sports performance. Everybody's scared before a performance. You know, and I think those people in denial of it that's all they are. They're just in denial of it. I think it's still there. And I think because it's still there, it's still beneficial. But I think to say I'm never scared of anything, I'm like, come on.
I agree. Brilliant place to finish. Look, Phil, I really appreciate your time on that. I'm delighted to hear that the business is going so well on it, and I look forward to sharing the message that you've got because you're so passionate and knowledgeable about the area. So well done with everything that you've achieved so
Thank
far,
you.
and good luck with it.
I appreciate that. Thanks for having me, Andy.